on that roadside picking blackberries.
How y'all doing today? Great. Well, it's an honor to be here as part of both Young Americans for Freedom and Young Americans Foundation's historic role in helping to found and organize CPAC, and certainly like to thank ACU for this opportunity. Our next speaker today was elected in 2010 to serve Utah in the United States Senate. Senator Lee acquired our deep respect for the Constitution early on. His father served as the Solicitor General under Ronald Reagan and learned about conservative values at the kitchen table growing up. Senator Lee also learned about the judicial system by watching his father argue before the Supreme Court. Senator Lee was also the first senator to endorse Ted Cruz when Ted Cruz had about a 2% chance of winning. So please give a warm welcome to Senator Mike Lee.
Thank you. It's great to be at CPAC today. Today I want to tell you a story. Up in the Northwest, there were two brothers. Their names were Billy and Bobby. One day they decided that they were going to sell apples. So they set up a small fruit stand by the side of a busy road, and then they drove their old pickup truck out to the farmer's orchard. And there they purchased a big truckload of apples at a price of $1 an apple. They returned to their stand and they started selling apples for the head-scratching, bargain basement price of $1 an apple. After selling the entire load, the brothers drove back to the orchard. They bought another truckload of apples at the price of $1 an apple. Then back at the fruit stand, the apples were just flying off the shelves. Again, still at the bargain basement price of $1 an apple. And in no time, they found that they had sold every apple, and they enthusiastically raced back to the farmer for another load. They filled their truck and they paid the farmer $1 an apple, and then, sweaty and exhausted from their efforts, the two brothers hopped back in their truck again and hurried toward their stand. As they drove, Billy said to Bobby, "You know, I've been thinking, we've been working really hard today, and we've sold 2 truckloads full of apples. But it doesn't seem like we're making any real progress in our business." And Bobby thought about it for a minute, and he said, you know, you're right. He thought about it long and hard, and he said, "Do you think we need a bigger truck?" You know, when it comes to the size and the cost and the scope of our federal government, I'm here to tell you that we do not need a bigger truck. Like Billy and Bobby, we instead need to stop and think about what it is that we're trying to accomplish at the end of the day and how best to achieve that. Unfortunately, right now we have a president who not only wants a bigger truck, but he wants a truck with personalized license plates, heated leather seats, a tricked-out stereo system, and a rack. Now, it's probably not a gun rack, at least not without universal background checks, but maybe it's a rack for his golf clubs. In fact, did you listen to the president's inaugural address in January? Big fans of it, I'm sure, all of you. Well, it was an extended infomercial, in essence, for the biggest and most expensive truck in the world. In soaring rhetoric, no 60-second truck commercial could ever match or exceed. The president rattled off a myriad of really big government programs, which were each touted as the latest and greatest way for every American to have a bigger truck filled with massive government programs and, of course, the promise of utopia. Of course, there was no mention ever made about the price of the truck, the size of the debt, or how or when the payments on that truck would have to be made. And by the way, I should add here that I'm pretty sure he violated a number of truth in advertising standards as he was giving this speech. He really should have hired that fast-talking, lawyerly voiceover guy who races through the disclaimers at the end of the commercial. And he should have said something like, this big truck you were about to buy will not solve all of your problems, it will not pay your mortgage, it will not provide you health care, or give you a job, or provide for your retirement. Your truck loan and that of your neighbors is payable to the Chinese government and will be painfully extracted from you today and from your children tomorrow. If this whole thing in politics doesn't work out for me, I could be that voiceover guy. But here's what kills me. As conservatives, instead of focusing on the real issues and the real goals for our society, we have at times been sucked into debating about what size of truck we really need. We argue that we need a smaller truck, a smarter truck, a limited purpose truck, a more efficient truck, or even just an all-around better truck. But I repeat, it's not about the truck. It's time for us as conservatives to reframe the debate. It is time for us to focus on the principles that will lead us to the kind of country and the kind of society we want for ourselves and for our future. Here's the principle that I'm asking conservatives to understand and embrace, that the opposite of bad government is not good government. It isn't even just limited government. The opposite of bad government is civil society. A free and strong civil society is built on the innate desire of Americans to freely contribute to the betterment of the community. Civil society is the result of the relationships that connect and bind and strengthen us. It is what drives each of us to do our part to help those around us. Civil society, you see, is where free individuals thrive and communities flourish. The interconnection of local communities has always been at the very heart of our great nation. And I'm convinced that our future success will in fact be found in a return to that connectedness that has always driven the American dream from the very beginning. We see civil society when a parent instills values in a child, when a doctor heals a patient, when a teacher stays late to help a student learn to read, when a neighbor stops to help a neighbor. These are the bonds that will restore our faith in the institutions of civil society and move us away from reliance on bureaucratic, centralized decision-making. We the people does not mean a collective adherence to the agenda of the ruling class. It instead means that as Americans we share basic values and principles that when viewed as a whole form and protect a more perfect union. Conservatives' belief in civil society is grounded on bedrock principles of freedom, self-reliance, and self-governance, and is manifest in the form of historic institutions, including the family, schools, churches, private groups, and civic organizations. These institutions of civil society teach the morals, the values, and the behaviors that tend to instill faith, confidence, and trust between individuals, communities, and even the government. The Constitution of our great nation provides the framework that ennobles the vision of the individual, while at the same time enabling the value of the institutions to create an environment where people prosper and where society succeeds. Government cannot create civil society, but it does have the capacity to kill it. And over the last 80 years, the federal government has expanded well beyond its constitutional limits. The history of progressive thought demonstrates that as the power of the federal government increases, the ability to self-govern diminishes. And as self-governance decreases, so too the influence of the institutions of civil society are likewise diminished. Soon, the ability to instill faith, confidence, and trust among individuals and within communities is replaced by the false promises of a big, omnipresent government. And the more our citizens look to big government for solutions, the more the strength of civil society is sapped away. And our collective muscle as a nation, the very muscle that has formed the greatest civilization the world has ever known, atrophies. In this country, results matter. And when it comes to the dismal and even dreadful outcomes delivered by the promises of big government, no rhetoric can cover the reality of the results. We must remember that whenever government becomes too involved in anything, bad things happen. Is it any wonder that the vast majority of Americans have little to no confidence in government, and that they have even less confidence in Congress, as manifest by Congress's current approval rate of about 15%, which, by the way, makes us as members of Congress just a little more popular than Raul Castro and only slightly more popular than the influenza virus. But the virus is catching us quickly. The current angst and apprehension among Americans originates in part because it's easy to forget where to look for solutions, for strength, and for certainty. I suggest that a return to civil society, engaged, self-reliant, free individuals, building and strengthening communities is the answer. America is extraordinary, not because of who we are, but because of what we do. Despite the current crushing weight of our bloated federal bureaucracy, we can still see the strength of our nation's fabric through the intertwining actions of the genuine heroes all around us. They're often disguised as the daily deeds that everyday citizens perform, and they perform them every single day. And we see, again, that civil society, whenever a neighbor stops to help a neighbor, whenever a fifth grader stands up to a bully for a fellow classmate, when a public servant ably serves the public above and beyond the call of duty, when a pastor inspires faith in a troubled soul, or when a bystander steps in to harm's way to defend a fellow being. It is often the small and the seemingly insignificant things we can and should do each and every day that ultimately determine the greatness of America. And so when we look within and to each other, instead of looking to Washington and to government, we will see the greatness of our country's excellence, and we will see the true greatness of our country reemerge. Today, we're witnessing what happens at the end of the progressive big government approach. After the promises of federal solutions have eroded our faith in the institutions of family, school, church, and community, and having spent our nation to the point of bankruptcy, progressives simply shrug their shoulders, throw up their hands, and say, "It isn't my fault, it isn't my job, and it's not my responsibility." That's a very un-American approach to a challenge. I saw this attitude once on a trip through southern Utah with my family. We stopped at a fast food restaurant for lunch, and because my wife Sharon was with me, I thought it would look good if I chose to go to the salad bar instead of buying a hamburger. I went down the salad bar getting bits of healthy greens and dreadfully nutritious-looking vegetables. I was quite uninspired at my prospects for an appetizing lunch that day, when, to my great surprise and delight, at the very end of the salad bar, I found chocolate pudding. I immediately scooped a huge blob of it onto my plate, trying to hide it by fluffing around greens and other tasteless things so that it couldn't be seen. Suddenly, I was feeling very, very good about my lunch, looking very healthy, but still getting dessert and a lot of it. As I sat down, I mentally complimented myself for the ingeniousness of what I was about to pull off. I was about to pull it off, and still smiling at that thought, I took a big bite of the chocolate pudding, only to discover that it was completely rancid, rotten, and spoiled. It was awful. I immediately decided that I needed to go and find an employee of the restaurant, so that I could alert the restaurant of the spoiled pudding. I approached one young lady who worked there, and I said, "Excuse me," in a soft voice, "Excuse me, I just want to let you know that the pudding at the salad bar, it's spoiled. You need to replace it." She gave me a deer-in-the-headlights sort of blank stare. I clarified, "The pudding, it's rancid, it's bad, it's spoiled. You've got to get rid of it before someone eats it and gets sick." She proceeded to roll her eyes and deliver that deep, soul-crushing sigh that America's teenagers have so perfected, and simply said, "I'm not on salad." And then she walked away. "I'm not on salad." Instead of that type of shoulder shrugging, what we need in this nation, and especially in this town, in Washington, is some serious shoulder squaring in the spirit of civil society. You see, in that sense, we are all on salad. We are all on helping someone in need. We are all on dealing with our national debt, on building our communities, on upholding the Constitution, on restoring the greatness of this great nation. I invite each of you to square your shoulders and be on salad. The synergy, connection, and strength that comes from civil society is not only what has made and preserved us a nation, but what will lead us toward a bright future and better days to come. In order to move forward on this path to a flourishing civil society, I invite you to join me on a journey back. back to a place and time not unlike our own. It was a turbulent time of deep division within our young republic. George Washington recorded the events of March 4th, 1797, the last day of his second term as President of the United States. Washington wrote, "It was with a heavy heart that I left my room today, thinking not so much of myself as of our country." Walking out onto Chestnut Street in Philadelphia, Washington continued, "I was plain George Washington now, neither general nor president. Suddenly I realized I was not alone. People were following me, at first just a few, and then a swelling crowd. For a long moment I stood face to face with them. The young cobbler, the carpenter, the storekeeper, the laborer, all of them stood facing me. They said not a word. I realized that Providence was showing me a vision of America, of what it would become. I could feel assured that come what may, whether it be political bickering or any other evil in government, our country rests in good hands, in the hands of its people." A similar crowd has gathered here today at CPAC. Political strife divides our country. Government is expanding in ways that would shock the founding generation. And as I look out at this crowd, I don't see cobblers and shopkeepers, but I do see scientists and school teachers, web designers and entrepreneurs, mothers and fathers and friends. I'm also confident that our country rests in good hands, in the hands of its people. Hand in hand, acting on the instincts of our better angels and connected in the principle of civil society, we the people, and not we the government, will form a more perfect union and thereby ensure that the vision of George Washington becomes the destiny of this nation. May God bless the United States of America. Thank you very much.